This is so indicative of what YouTube's like right now. Why I left YouTube for 8 months and the journey so far. And right down here, thoughts. Success on YouTube is still means a life of poverty. Sorry, I'm trying to read that through the viewfinder. It's just like that's exactly what is the current trend on YouTube, is to complain about YouTube, because there's no way to break into YouTube right now except for through that topic. Right now, people build their channels on the fact that they are fucked over by YouTube. How many channels have you seen? I Hate Everything, Mumkey Jones, who had huge spikes in viewership after their channels were deleted and they had like large-scale pleas to have them brought back, you know? And that drew a lot of attention, and like that is the drama sphere on YouTube now, because the drama YouTubers have all pulled the veil off of themselves, like quelled all their beefs. All the fuckboys have gone off to Facebook. All we've got left is like Logan Paul, and you know, whatever. There's a controversy. That's the only other subject that ever happens. That's the only other discussion you'll get on YouTube right now. If we're not complaining about the state of YouTube, we're complaining about the state of Logan Paul. That is what is relevant to YouTube now, and nothing else is. Like, everyone's on it. YouTubers who were not doing like this kind of trendy content are now like trying to jump on that bandwagon at a time when there's like just ubiquity in these subjects being talked about. You know, like it's relevant to literally everyone because nothing else is. There's nothing else going on the platform that would distract people from these controversies. So it's the last trend on YouTube. It's the last one that we might ever have, because if this could be YouTube's death spiral, if it's going the way that everyone seems to think it is, if anyone can ever appear who can actually compete with the goddamn website in a sensible way, because we've got all these websites that keep springing up that don't really function correctly, or like are just, they disappear. VidMe just died. VidMe showed up, was like, hey, we're gonna try to compete with YouTube, and everyone was like, you don't have any money behind you. You don't have a corporation behind you. How are you going to sustain the hosting for your alternative site that no advertisers are going to want to run on because it breaks copyright? And that's like, it's advertised as like an alt-right escape route. They couldn't maintain that, of course. But like, someone should try, because I think that Netflix at least recognizes the weaknesses in YouTube and is like trying to penetrate their armor from the outside, but like they're not making the same kind of content that we are on YouTube. So like YouTube should be able to somehow generate a trend, somehow create a way for people to make a different sort of content, you know, but they have to do that fast because people want to get the hell, people want to make money again, you know. If there's nothing you can do on YouTube, if you can't be original and be promoted by the system, because like it just de-incentivizes doing anything but being as trendy as possible, or just like pumping out daily long form content. If those are your only options, like, no one can do any of the creative shit that they want to do, which is why they came to the platform. They just wanted to do creative shit and hope to make a living off of it. And if they can't make a living off of it and they have to sell out their art, then they're gonna be like, I don't want to fucking be here anymore, you know. And every day that passes by that something hasn't changed is just like an agonizing weight on the shoulders of these people who are just like, when will it fix? When will it end? When will my life be back to what it was supposed to be a few years ago? And when I know it can be, because it was successful for a time for us, so like surely there must be a paradigm by which it can be successful again. Someone must find it, you know. Someone needs to find a way to make this kind of content viable as it once was on the internet. But you know, in the meantime, switching gears, you don't need YouTube. Nobody really needs YouTube. We really just need Patreon. And I think that not enough people realize that you can spread your audience through just getting yourself out there and associating with enough people and socializing enough to brand yourself and, succeed outside of having like a centralized audience, a centralized hub. It used to be that everyone wanted to have a website. Back before YouTube, that was like your goal, was get a URL, run ads on your website, keep people coming back to whatever your unique brand of content is. But like most content did have some formulaicness because like there were certain paradigms that worked for advertisers. Like if you run a webcomic, people are likely to binge read your whole comic. They only have to be on each page for like a second, but they're going through page after page after page and seeing the same ads. So they're, racking up the CPM on those ads, and that's why those websites were successful back then. But eventually people realized that nobody actually clicks on those fucking ads, so they weren't making anybody any money. So advertisers just like cut the cost of their ads. They were just like, we're not going to pay as much. And so the webcomics fucking died. And now, in order to be a webcomic artist on the internet, you don't have like an easy way to make money through advertisers. You have to convince an audience that like you are worth spending money on. And it's not easy to do that with artwork alone, because even if you do have like pretty great art, if you don't have masterful art, then you're competing with like, someone else on Patreon who has masterful art. So you got to be able to sell yourself on some kind of narrative. Either your art communicates something about a certain community, like if you make LGBT art, then you can be successful on Patreon because you have exactly that community patroning your artwork. Or if you have a strong personality, if you're like a vlogger who's also doing something else on the side, and you say that the Patreon's for that thing and the vlogs are just for ad revenue or something, like you can have a lot of paradigms by which you can still run a successful webcomic. And like, it's fascinating to see the different ways that people have used Patreon. I'll give you a couple of examples. For instance, Asterios Kokkinos is a comedian who has one of the most fascinating Patreons I've ever seen, especially back when it launched, because I was a patron of him from day one. And there was no central hub of Asterios Kokkinos content. There was no website that hosts all of his stuff. He had like a website tied to one of his pseudonyms, and it had all of the content he had made under that pseudonym. And he had like, podcasts that he had been on that had their own pages. But he did not have like an Asterios Kokkinos webpage. He had a YouTube channel, but it was almost completely non-existent. Like 250 subscribers. Videos have like less than 200 views. Like it was a pitiful YouTube channel that had barely any of his shit on it. It was mostly super old, just like handheld recordings of his comedy specials. So his YouTube channel had nothing to do with why he was able to grow a Patreon to over $1,000 a month in the span of about a week. And the reason he was able to do that is that he had been a regular guest on a very popular podcast called The Dick Show. Now, Asterios Kokkinos is not, like, officially a part of the Dick Show podcast. He is, like, a frequent collaborator, and at this point, he's, like, so ingrained into it that, like, it's hard to imagine it without him. But, like, it's because of the strength of the narrative of that podcast, because of the fact that there was a previous podcast, The Biggest Problem in the Universe. It had this huge earth-shattering breakup. The two people went their separate ways. Dick was seen as the good guy in the conflict. Asterios took Dick's side. He got good guy points for that. So people wanted to support him because his career was in danger and he needed a lot of money. And his fans were like, you have supported the good people in this narrative that we already have ongoing. So that was the main reason that he made a lot of money on Patreon. But the funny thing about it is that what he was offering on Patreon was just a catalog of all the shit he had made. Because this guy had written for tons of old websites, like old magazine-style websites. He'd written for, stuff like Cracked.com. I don't know if he actually wrote for Cracked, but he wrote for a lot of websites of that ilk. He had done tons of like just articles for hire. He had just written articles and got paid a sort of bounty, and they were published, but they're not connected to him directly. Like, there's no idea of who is Asterios Kokkinos. He's just a guy who's shown up on web pages, and maybe one or two things he's written have gone kind of viral, but he's got a few comic books. Like, when he was on the old podcast, they would just promote him as he wrote this comic, this Mega Man comic. You can go read that. But the Mega Man comic's like a pamphlet, and it's obviously not like what is his main career. He's obviously not a comic author when he makes a pamphlet that like a few hundred people bought. Like, no. Asterios just does all kinds of freelance work all over the comedy sphere wherever he can. So he had just collected it all on his Patreon and was just like, support my existence within this industry, because this industry doesn't pay enough for the amount of debts I've racked up in my 35 years, the amounts of troubles that have come up in my life, the things I have to deal with that drain me of my money and my happiness. And if I could afford to put corks in those things, I could live a life where I would be full of, creativity and joy and ready to create more of this brand of comedy. That's essentially what Asterios was going for with his Patreon, is just like, make my life livable so I can continue, like, I can put my focus on comedy, so I don't have to focus as much on the day job, because Asterios works for an advertising company. Like, he has a normal job. He doesn't like exclusively rely on Patreon, but he makes a lot of money on Patreon, because he needs that in his life to make the comedy worthwhile. For some people, like, if there's not a certain level of success, it's like, I'm not comfortable enough to want to do this. So I think that there's some, it's like some people have a higher price on their head than others, I guess. If you want to hear this guy's voice, he needs to be able, like, for him to talk, his mouth needs to have been watered first by fine foods and wines, and his lungs need to have been blown out by the seediest of cannabis. I don't know why you would want it to be seedy, but that's what I demand in order for you to get to hear me ramble about the state of YouTube today. I got really confused because I rearranged the office and I forgot which wall was which for a second. Anyways, Asterios eventually did launch a regular podcast called Science Friction. He uploads it to YouTube, but it does like dog shit views there. It mostly just gets plays on like iTunes or whatever. His YouTube channel is still like not very successful. The only real original show he's doing for it is a show called Waifu Wars, which is like a very bizarre, like, mid-budget, low to mid-budget. We'll say it's like higher than what most YouTubers put in, but not much, amount of effort. It's not Red Letter Media level of effort, put into it. But like, they just like, It's a bizarre, like, normie anime show. Like, for people who are the most surface level possible. And if you even like one good thing, like, if you give any actual fuck about anime, then this show just looks like a bunch of normies who you watch just because they're funny, but, like, you don't think that their opinion on anime matters whatsoever, But it is a fun show, and I hope to be on it at some point. Asterios has not gotten back to me, but I was supposed to be on there. I gotta send him another email. Point being, the man is not really on YouTube, nor really anywhere. He just collects his work, and because he has word of mouth notoriety from being on at least one interesting, like widespread, widely known show, which is not even a show on YouTube. The Dick Show is a old school podcast that has its own website, or you can listen to it on iTunes. But there's other people who are doing similar things by being, like, attached vaguely to something on YouTube, like my friend Ben Saint, who is not a YouTuber. His audience, like, is mostly knows him from YouTube because of the fact that he's on the Procrastinators podcast, and he, used to do his own YouTube videos. He still does occasionally. I mean, I guess he doesn't anymore, but like he did a Nuzlocke series and some other stuff. So he has like a YouTube presence, but like his main thing is that he draws comics, and like the comics themselves are good, and that's what people patron for. Like nobody who's patroning him is somebody who doesn't read his comics and just listens to his YouTube appearances, but like the YouTube show is just why people know about him, So you don't really need to have like a YouTube channel, and I think a lot of people like really assume they need to have some kind of central hub for their content. And back in the old days of the internet, there were lots of people who existed only in download form. Like Casey Neistat had I think he had the first video to ever be called viral, and it was the bike lanes video. And that video went viral by way of download. Like 5 million people downloaded that video in order to watch it. So like, obviously it's harder to get people to do that nowadays because people are used to the convenience of YouTube, but like people aren't fucking just suddenly stupid now. Like they can do it if you make them, and there's been lots of people who've experimented with this. Rat King released an album via torrent a couple years back. Like it didn't end up getting a huge amount of press because it wasn't very good, but like people talked about it. It got reviewed by major reviewers, Like, they got their name out there without having to even upload it to a streaming site. They managed to get Anthony Fantano to put a review on his fucking channel that probably got 100,000 views. Like, guaranteed people know about that album, whether the guy telling them about it thinks it's good or bad, But, like, you can just find ways to get your shit out there, especially if you're a big name. You can do whatever you want, but like obviously at that point it doesn't matter. Like I wouldn't be posting anything to YouTube if I was a famous enough guy that like if let's say I was a rapper and I was dropping songs on fucking torrent, and Pitchfork was gonna write a post about that, a news post about it, like I would never post anything to YouTube again, because why bother when I could just release like literally whatever the fuck I want through like an easier channel, but or a freer channel I should say, but like I'm not famous like that, so. But I don't think that means we need like to have a whole YouTube page and everything. Like if you just use the YouTube page to tell people about the shit that's on other channels. And there was sort of a meme that JonTron started where he had said because his Jurassic Park 2 video had gotten blocked from YouTube, he had to post it on like what was it? What was the fucking name of the? I can't even Blip. I couldn't even remember the name of the fucking site. It's been dead for so long. He had to post it on Blip, and he made a joke where he said, "Might as well have been on my fucking grave." And like we used to say that, content creators used to say that to each other. Like if we had to post something on Blip, we'd be like, or on any website other than YouTube, it's just like, well, this video is never going to be seen. But that's not actually true, because if you go back to those videos, they usually get views over time because they have to spread through word of mouth. No, you're not going to get the immediate payout that like getting into the trending tab when your video, right when it goes public because you put Sword Art Online in the title and now you're on the front page and like your CPM's worth 4 times more. Like, yeah, that's immediate and very like beautiful monetary success. But like if you want to make some weird shit and you are worried about like anyone ever seeing it, you just gotta let it spread through word of mouth. I've got videos on Dailymotion that have slowly developed like huge amounts of views, or that had to be on like alt channels. That's why people know about my alt channels, is because like I had to post like part 2 of the Asterisk War over there, or part 2 of the Sword Art Online videos. Like the 2 video series I'm the most famous for, most of their videos are not even on my main channel because of the fact that I had so many restrictions that I had to release them elsewhere. And like part 2 of Sword Art Online has not been on anywhere online. Like you have to go to Google Drive, and then it got taken off of there. I don't even know if it's anywhere right now. I don't know how you can watch that, but people are still watching it somehow. Like, somehow people still seem to see all 4 parts, and I'm just like, where are you even going to watch part 2 right now, you know? But point being, like, if people want to find the shit, they will find it. Now, it's hard to get your name out there without having, like, some kind of strong base, you know, to first begin from. And, like, it's a lot easier if you already have a YouTube presence to then just splinter off and just tell your fans, hey, go find me over here. But, like, I do think if you can make good connections, if you can get people to talk about you or get people excited about what you're doing somehow, you know, just even if it's locally, literally, or within like a Discord group, if you can get a Discord group who really loves you to start posting your shit everywhere, like, I think you can take off from there, you know? And I mean, it's unfortunate that some people probably don't want to have a socializing element to, you know, promoting their art, but I'm just saying there's ways. There's a lot of ways. You don't need YouTube. You just need people to know who you are.